Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. I invite you to wonder about the origin of your understanding of the world. The question is not, how did the world originate? The question to ask yourself is, how did my understanding of the world originate? Actually, since you don't have any memories before you learned a natural language, and that didn't occur for many months after your birth, the question to ask yourself is, how must my understanding of the world have originated? Since it's impossible for you to remember it, let's reconstruct how it must have occurred. My thesis is that there's something of fundamental importance about how our minds work that this investigation will reveal that will help us to understand how emotional flourishing is possible. So, please be patient and let's work through this somewhat carefully. Yes, it's theoretical, but I hope to convince you of something that has great practical importance. It's of great practical importance to understand how it's possible to live well emotionally, isn't it? Remember though, I'm a nobody. I'm just another philosopher trying to live better. I have, though, made it my business for more than the last half-century to learn from the best philosophers I've been able to find. In this case, if you want more, I refer you to my dissertation director, Panayat Puchvarov. See his Being Qua Being. Our goal in this video series is to understand how to shift from suffering emotionally to flourishing emotionally. We want to drop either living poorly emotionally or living normally emotionally in order to live well emotionally. Since emotions are an important part of all our experiences of the world, let's understand their context, how they fit in. As I've mentioned twice before in this series, many judgments are predicative judgments that put a form under a concept, a principle of classification. Again, there's class membership judgments. For example, that is an oak tree, and predicative judgments, for example, that shirt is red. Logically, the corresponding structure is X is in F, and X is F, in which X is a variable that ranges over forms, like a blank space to be filled in by some form or other, and F is a variable that ranges over qualities. Again, a form, object, thing, is anything that can be singled out for attention. A quality is a commonality or property that multiple forms may share. I've also previously mentioned how we learn, how we increase our understanding. Clear understanding of this goes back to Aristotle. We come to understand a new form by relating it to what we've previously understood by noting relevant similarities and differences. When, for example, we encounter an avocado for the first time, we may quickly come to understand that it's like other berries or fruits in some respects, but unlike them in others. Tip: this is why it's always a good idea when investigating a new form to ask initially, what is this like? Rather than just, what is this? From a logical perspective then, once we have a first concept, we can get a second concept by encountering a new form and relating it to forms that fall under our initial concept. We'll never know which concept was your first one, but by now, several decades later, you have thousands and thousands of concepts. With normal color vision and bright sunlight, for example, you may have 200 different concepts of just the color blue. You've expanded your understanding a great deal from the time of your first judgment until now, haven't you? You may have just understood clearly for the first time how you expanded your conceptual hierarchy. Similarly, Edwin Hubble discovered the expansion of the universe. As soon as he did, it was possible to imagine it less expanded, smaller, yesterday than it is today. The day before yesterday, it was smaller than it was yesterday. And so on. Working backwards with accurate astronomical measurements, we now understand that there was a Big Bang some 13.8 billion years ago. That's just an analogy, of course, but it was somewhat like that with your first concept when you were an infant. That initial concept led to the possibility of your second one, and so on. You have now developed a highly sophisticated conceptual framework that you actually employ daily to understand what's going on. Mostly, too, you employ it automatically, as I have previously pointed out. What must have happened for you to have that sophisticated way of understanding? In particular, it's not just that you began with some first concept or other and expanded and deepened it by noting relevant similarities and differences. How did you get your first concept? After all, it wasn't innate. Human beings are not born with some innate concept. It's true that our ability to have a first concept was innate. After all, without that ability, we'd have never understood anything and so never survived. So our question really becomes, how did you get here from there? How did you develop an initial concept that could be expanded and deepened into a whole huge conceptual hierarchy? How did you begin with no concepts and get that first one? Please wonder about that. Our inquiry is logical, but it's easier to approach this subject matter if we do so psychologically. Let's consider what I suggest is the right answer in the next video. If it withstands your examination, you'll soon begin to understand clearly how living well emotionally is possible. Let's end emotional distress